Welcome to Steve Allen's Comedy Room, where funny people gather just for laughs. Visiting us today, nightclub and television veteran Jan Murray, television comedy star Bob Newhart, legendary storyteller Danny Thomas, up-and-coming young comedian Franklyn Ajaye, the Terry Gibbs Sextet, and now your host, Steve Allen.
Thank you very much. Well, you may think that the studio audience is unusually up today, and it would seem to be indeed the case. There was a flurry of excitement and a nervous titter. Titters and flurries are definitely what this audience is giving us. Laughs, we'll see about that later. Our distinguished sidekick, who despite the great pain from all those kicks in the side, is game trooper that he is, sticking with it, Mr. Joe Baker from London. Here he is. Are you tired, Joe?
I'm sorry I'm late. I was listening to the radio, actually.
Oh, yeah, I heard you back there. I saw some little crowd around you. What was up?
Well, the Olympics.
Oh, news about the Olympics?
Wonderful.
What's that?
The East German pole vaulting champion
Yes?
is now the West German pole vaulting champion.
That is nice. Nice to hear the good news. Remember, folks, you heard it here first. There's an old saying in show business, I don't know anyone, come to think of it, who employs the figure of speech more than Sammy Davis. Have you ever noticed, Fred, everybody Sammy Davis introduces, I was at the Cher show the other night, he says, and here is my old friend, my dear friend, everybody in show business. I swear I once heard him say, now my very dear friend, Nikita Khrushchev, ladies and gentlemen. Sammy does that. Well, this next gentleman is an old and dear friend. Trying to think whether he's older or dearer. Well, it probably balances out in the long run. Anyway, he's a very funny gentleman. That's all we have here as guests on the Comedy Room show, so that goes without saying. But he is, in addition to being wonderfully successful and brilliantly funny on stage, he is one of the world's greatest parlor comedians. And as you know, Joe, do you have parlors, or what do you call your front rooms in England? Parlors?
Parlor.
Parlor, you mean. All right. Anyway, not everybody who is funny on stage is funny in a room. Some of your favorite comedians would be pretty dull if you had lunch with them, to tell you the truth. But other folks probably could make you laugh even more, and this guy is in that category. Mr. Jan Murray, here he is. I don't know why, Jan, but you look like the first guy in the morning at a doctor's waiting room over there.
And I'm thrilled with that introduction. I'm a parlor comedian. That really choked me up. It brought tears to my eyes, you know.
But I said
now, I have some friends that don't have a parlor. They'll never invite me to the house again. They're saying, a parlor's great. You put them in a living room, stinks. Nothing. Can't get a laugh. Nothing.
Now then, a little company over there in the lonely place for Jan Murray. Back in the 1950s, I worked for 7 years for NBC, 3.5 on the old Tonight Show, and then another 4 years during old Sunday night primetime comedy series. And one of the reasons that 7-year stretch was such a pleasure was that the two programs provided the opportunity to discover, or in many cases just locate, clever new comedians and bring them to the attention of a national audience. In our last season with NBC, I had learned of a then unknown comedian named Bob Newhart, and had sent a note to one of our people to hire him. Unfortunately, the series itself ended just at that time, so Bob never actually got to do the show, and we're making up for lost time tonight. At that point, a record album he had just made became an immediate bestseller, so Bob no longer needed any particular assistance in becoming recognized. It was his own great talent and originality that did the trick. Welcome, Bob Newhart. Here he is.
Now there's two of us in the dentist's office.
But we have more company for you. It's fascinating that of all the comedians we've had on the show, on the series, each is funny in his own way. And if we had room enough for 1,000 comedians, that would still be the case. No two funny guys are funny in identically the same ways. This next man is a master of the art of storytelling. Now, 20 years ago, we had a lot of competition. At the moment, it's pretty close to no competition at all. And in many ways, a very funny gentleman. Another dear friend, Danny Thomas. Here he is. Hi, guys.
Steve,
Yes, Jan.
I have to tell you that Bob just leaned over, whispered in my ear. Did you notice? I came down the steps faster than Danny. Hey, everything is a victory. We take any victory we
Any
can.
little thing.
I'm always afraid the applause is going to die out right about your chest. So
No, but I was told to stand there so they could get a shot.
Okay.
You did it wrong. Go back and do it again.
I don't pause because they'll really shoot one day. You know what I mean? Be a
Would you
movie
guys
star.
like to enter again? I mean,
Huh?
we work very loose. You want to enter again?
I liked it better when I was on this couch by myself.
A moment ago, I mentioned the many different styles of comedy. Nobody, I think, when he starts out, you find out when you're 17 or 22 or whatever that you're funny. Finally, you do it well enough to make a living at it. I don't think any of us ever said to himself, I'm going to be funny in a different way. It was just all being yourself, basically, right?
Right.
Danny, when did you find out you were funny? Seriously.
Well, I was on a radio show in Detroit, Michigan, and called the Happy Hour Club, and I was singing.
You were roughly how old?
18, 19,
Mm-hmm.
About 19, and the master of ceremonies made fun of my nose. And I was singing, ho hum, spring is here. Now, the worst singer you ever heard in your life, but the worst.
No, not truly.
Oh, but, as I matured, when I passed 60, I started to sing good.
You always sang great.
Well,
It's your comedy I'd like to question.
I love the brumpums.
That's perfect. You got your own brum-bum.
Oh, yeah.
So the audience should know that's a joke, right?
Right, yeah.
Good.
So anyway, then I had a date. I made a date with a girl at I was going to work one night that we get $2 in a beer garden.
Literally $2.
$2, $1 a show, $2. And I didn't get the job. I was sure I was going to get it. I was going to take her to the movies and have a sandwich and a malt. Now I had 80 cents in my pocket and I didn't know what to do. So I didn't keep the date with the girl, and she got very angry with me, and she wrote to the radio station, ask Amos Jacobs, which is my real name.
Mm-hmm.
Ask Amos, is that his nose or is he eating a banana? Which is, I guess, is a burlesque joke from 100 years ago. Anyway, the master of ceremonies read that on the air, and then people started writing in. They wanted to see this nose that was eating a banana, and they booked me into little theaters for $2 a day, and people just stared at my nose, that's all.
A laugh is a laugh.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that you said you were about 19 when you realized you were funny. Bob, what about in your case? How old were you when you were getting laughs at the school or office or wherever?
I can't pinpoint it. My grandparents took me to see Jan.
You thought you could do
And I
that?
said, that's what I want to do.
This is when I was still alive.
Now, I was kind of surprised the first time people laughed because I thought they were just going to say, yeah, that's right. You know, I mean, I was just saying things that I thought were
At what age?
kind of evident. 20, 21, 22.
Mm-hmm. That is unusual.
Yeah, very unusual.
Yeah, but didn't you write? You wrote before that.
Well, no, what I did, I wrote and performed.
Oh.
And then...
Comedy?
Yeah.
Well, his monologues,
songs.
the records that he made left you on
No,
the
I know
floor.
that, but I'm trying to find out at how old
I'll tell you a story you don't know. I was in Chicago and I wasn't working at all. I mean, I could not get arrested. And a comedian came through town. I won't mention who it was. And
Why not?
Because he's still alive.
How come they're making bets in the audience?
So he was playing at the Cloisters in Chicago, so I approached him to sell him the Submarine Commander. And he said...
It's one of your models.
The first out, one of the first on the first album.
Great.
And he said, well, it's funny, he said, but it's not really the kind of thing I do. So about 2 weeks later, I was watching your show on Sunday night. Mm-hmm. And he came on and he did a chunk of the Submarine Commander, the piece of material I tried to sell him.
No kidding.
That he said wouldn't work.
Wow.
So I said, well, if they're going to steal it, I may as well do it myself. So, I mean, at that point, I was ready to just write comedy, not really perform.
That's what I thought. That's what I heard.
So I'm indebted to him.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln is still to this day the classic of all.
It's so interesting that these guys started at 19 and 21. When I was 21, I was making my third comeback in this business.
You did actually perform professionally quite young.
No, not really. Nothing could have been more alien or foreign for me to wind up in a business. We never knew anyone in show business. I wasn't one of these kids whose mother gave...
You were from New York?
From New York. You know, I never took violin lessons or singing, dancing. And I was never in a school play or anything. Mm-hmm. But my mother, who was a very sick woman, she passed away at an early age. The only, her only surcease from pain were vaudevillians and doctors. Those are the two types of people she loved, you know. So every time there was a change of vaudeville, when I was a kid, in our local theater, you know, in Lowe's in the Bronx, my mother would take me. And when I was about 15 years old, I was invited to a Sweet 16 party. Mm-hmm. And I got a crush on a hostess, but she didn't pay any attention to me. So in order to get her attention, what I did was I took a couple of my friends. I had all this material in my head that I had seen through the years, you know, but I'd never had done them publicly. And I said, I'm going to do a show for you tonight. She says, what do you mean? I says, well... because she did say that she was miserable. She felt the party wasn't clicking and wasn't doing well. So I said to her, I'll put on a little show. So I called my friends, and I took them in a bathroom, and I rehearsed little things that I'd seen in vaudeville and all that, and that's the first time I'd ever appeared in public. And when we got these big laughs that night, that was it. I was hooked. Yeah, I was about 15 years of age.
Now, when I tell the audience that you worked in burlesque, depending on how old individual viewers are, they could be surprised by that, because we think of burlesque as a now very old-fashioned thing that took place in the 1920s, early 30s, and so forth. But you got in sort of the end of burlesque, say, when you were very young, right?
Right. Yes, I was about 18 years of age. Well, one of the first jobs I got was in Lakewood, New Jersey. You know, once I announced I wanted to be in the business, my dad thought I was just lazy, you know. You know, what are you sleeping till 9 o'clock? I said, well, there are no agents around till 10:30 or 11. Yeah. Why should I get up at 5 and wander downstairs? And he didn't understand. What show? What do you do? Do you sing? Do you dance? You know, it's the old joke. To this day, I don't sing or dance. Why don't you quit? Too late, I'm a star. You know, it's an old joke. So at any rate, we finally, I played it's a long, convoluted story, but I did work in the mountains, and then I came home and couldn't find a job. I used up the little few bucks that I made in the mountains. I was getting $3 a week, room and board.
Pardon me for interrupting you, Jan, but you've assumed that everybody knows the term the mountains. Now, Paul Bunyan also worked in the mountains, so we...
This mountains, the women have the bunions, you know.
You're talking about...
Nice, heavy-set ladies walk around with bunions. They can't walk. So you talk about the Catskill Mountains, and people refer to it as the Boer Circuit. It was a great...
Largely Jewish clientele?
At that time, yes. Yeah. At that time, of course, it was mostly Jewish clientele, and...
great birthplace for many great comedians. Yeah.
Well, outside of these Gentiles from the Midwest, we all came from there. That's where we all came from. You know, our whole era came from
I have to interrupt. I have to say one thing. Danny and I do a lot of Catholic benefits.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I always start off by saying, if there is a God, why didn't he make more Catholic comics? I mean, every third Jew is a comic, and we're the only...
And I feel everybody on this good God's earth has a right to be Gentile. You know? But this guy abuses the privilege. I mean, you ever see Bob Newhart's family crest? It's a jar of mayonnaise on a field of white bread.
Danny.
You know, let me, when he laid it on us, the Midwestern Gentiles, Bob doesn't have any problem at all, but see, I'm so in between. Now, I was an honorary member of an all-Jewish golf club, Hillcrest Country Club. And over the years, they finally decided that they were just as bigoted as the other bigots, and now they're going to take Gentiles. And I was an honorary member for years, and so I heard about it, and I said, I want to come. And I brought my check, and I came running, and I said, you're taking Gentiles? Here's my check. And they said, Danny, we decided if we're going to take Gentiles, we should take Gentiles who look like Gentiles. So I got a problem.
Johnny, if you don't have to be told, but I'm just letting some younger people down on the news. There was one particular nightclub booking in your career that after which it was all easy sledding for you, and before that it had been rough. Most people, by the way, think that as soon as you decide to become a professional comedian, it must be a million laughs from that day on. Usually, as Jan's story has suggested, you have several very difficult years, and then finally, if you're lucky, things get better. Well, what were you doing? You told us about the radio work. Were you doing dumb little clubs before you played at the 5100 Club on Chicago South Side?
No, in truth, my hope was to be a character actor.
Really?
On the radio. And I had worked around Detroit in a program which is a news program like the old March of Time called News Comes to Life. Mm-hmm. And the day that Gershwin died, George Gershwin died, they needed someone to impersonate Al Jolson. And I did one of the worst impersonations of Al Jolson. Mm-hmm. Yeah, listen, you know. And you do just listen. If you do listen, and then
that's it.
God bless his soul. You know, he used to say,
Who are you doing?
Come on.
Eddie Cantor. No, I used to do Eddie Cantor in the beer garden for $2. To augment the $5.
Change.
Should get the change back. It's too late for the big stuff. Anyway, and they called, and would I do it, and so forth. And I got to talk like him, and I tried, and that was close enough for jazz, Detroit, what are they? Who ever saw Jolson in person in those days? And, you know, because you never really understood a lot of things. Remember we used to sing California, here I come. California, here I come. None get me, don't be late.
He doesn't pray. Nobody knew what he said.
Don't be late. So I got a copy of music where Sun-Kissed Maid said, don't be late. None get them, none be late.
It's amazing. You also do Durante.
I did. Oh, you're talking about Mr. Adorable.
Yeah.
One of God. Anyway, I was doing that, and I went on. I left Detroit, went to Chicago because all the soap operas were in Chicago.
Big radio town.
Big radio town. WENR, MEQ. They were the blue and red network of NBC. Today, the government made them divest themselves of one of them, and that's ABC, the blue network. And there was WBBM, Chicago, CBS. And I had some experience in sound. In Detroit on WXYZ on the Lone Ranger, I got on 3 times. I played the horse's hooves. True. With 2, I don't want to wreck your microphone. No, you did 2 plungers, and you know, and then you got, Mike Roy was too busy. He had too much, so I had to stand in the gravel and go, then I'm going like this, and then, no, they said that's pretty good, and then I got up to the mic and I went. They said, give him the job, boy. That's really great. Some job. Oh, boy. So anyway, and now I'm doing well. I'm working at least 3 days a week, getting $17.50.
That's a horse.
No, this is now in...
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is now in Chicago.
I see.
As a horse's hoof.
Now, come on.
Imagine if they raised them up.
Now, come on.
What he could earn.
Never mind.
Anyway,
Sorry.
so I'm working 3 days a week, and you get $17.50 for the first broadcast, and then 3 hours later, you do it again for the West Coast. And you get another $5. If you're preempted, you make $17.50. If they really do it, you get $22. I was making $22.50 3 times a week. So to augment my salary, I wanted some club dates, what you do for the Kiwanis and the Knights of Columbus and the B'nai B'rith or whatever, and the Masons. And you get like $25 a night, which is a lot of money. So you pick up 2, and 3 times $22.50, and then $50 on the weekend. Hey, that's where I was going, and I got a job at the old 5100 Club, and I had no act, because I hadn't really, I played a kazoo in Detroit, pal. They call me the Tin Horn Cavalier. What guts? You know, I'll never forget, digress, the 4-star review with Jimmy Durante, Edwin, and Jack Carson.
In the early 50s.
In the 1950, exactly. And we used to rotate. And they picked me out of the Martinique as the young guy, the young comic. And it was, now I've got the kinescopes at home. And any time ego overtakes me, I run one of those. Though I wouldn't hire me today for all of it. No way, no. That was it terrible. And I went there. Now, I walk out, you know, and I'll tell you this, and I mean it, Bob, from my heart, Jan and Steve, from my heart. I know in my own heart, if I were a young man today, starting out today, doing what I know how to do, I wouldn't make it.
Really?
No way. How could I come out and say, the first thing I said in the 5100 Club, I had been in a delicatessen in the afternoon, and if I'm making this up, I hope I drop dead. A woman walked in the delicatessen, and she said, I would like to have some lox. And that's salmon with high blood pressure, lox. He said, how much lox would you like, Mrs. Lethbridge? She said, go ahead, cut. So he cut a few slices. He said, they'll make a nice lunch for you and your husband. She said, cut. Cut a few more slices. He said, maybe it's company having for dinner. Cut a few more slices. He stopped. He said, Mrs. Lethbridge, you want all that lox? She said, nah, the next 2 slices. And it happened, and people laughed. So anytime, I was telling the guys before, I swear to you, nobody writes for me. Storytellers don't have people write stories. Yeah. Anytime I go to these benefits, whether it's the Irish thing or the Friendly Sons of Italy or the Polish International something league, whatever they call that thing now, whoever they are, because I love ethnic humor, and never am I going to change that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, some old guy will call you aside and say,
a great story.
A great story. Tell you a story. I say, fine, you're beautiful. Thank you very much. And you go on the stage and you do it.
You know, a fascinating point about that, and this is a question I have put to literally hundreds of comedy writers and scores of comedians over the years, is who is it that writes those stories about, you know, a rabbi, a minister, and a priest, and St. Peter said, well, you can come in, but the punchline is whatever. Yeah. And the question is very simple. Have you, Jim, Bill, Charlie, ever written one of those stories? And for 40 years, everybody has said, no, I never personally have. I've mentioned this on television, as I am now. Sometimes you have 20 million people listening. Never once did I get a postcard from a guy who said, yeah, I do that, or my uncle wrote it. No. Now, that is really an ongoing, long-distance mystery. And we're not about to solve it now. I'm just pointing out the mystery.
There's always been the rumor it was in the prisons.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a lie. I've talked to a lot of ex-cons about that. They say that's a dumb idea. Yeah. Most of the people here are too stupid to write a letter to their mother. One of the elements that's made these comedy room shows fun is from time to time we take a little clip and we show things the guy. We don't want to bother make them get up and perform now. But there's a clip that we have tracked down somewhere, Bob. I found it in my own files. How it got there, Lord knows. Anyway, it's you doing one of your classic telephone routines.
You sent it to me, and because I wanted to know what show it was from, so they could clear it. And I remember doing it. I have really no idea what show it's from.
It's remarkable. If you show a comedian something he did 10, 15, 20 years before, it's very common. It happens to me. I often think, I vaguely remember that. Sometimes I don't remember it at all. On one of the other shows, we did a thing that I wrote for Shecky Green and myself, and I don't remember ever doing it. It's weird. But we did. Anyway. We have this routine where Bob Newhart is working with telephones. It's one of those things where you dial a prayer, dial the weather, dial a date, and here it is. You'll see what I'm talking about.
It really intrigued me, the thought that somewhere in the country, in at least one town, there's probably some guy in a small central office who's trying to handle all these calls by himself. Hello, dial a friend. How are you, friend? Little lonely tonight, huh? Yeah. Well, just remember there are thousands of people out there. They're just... hold on just a minute, pal, would you? Hello, suicide prevention. You're on the ledge of the 40th floor of a hotel. Well, gee, that won't solve anything, pal. Have you thought about taking up a hobby? You're just getting ready to take up a hobby. Skydiving. Are you wearing? You're not wearing anything. You can get a bad cold there. You're getting ready to set a new free fall record. A new nude free fall record. And you're hanging by your fingertips. Can I put you on hold for just a minute? Hello, darling. Your husband left you, and you're looking for another man. What sort of man are you looking for? You want a man who's not afraid to make the big leap. Fella, you still on the ledge there? I got a lady here. Sounds like she might be just right for you. What does she look like? Oh, hold on just a minute. Ma'am, would you describe yourself? 5'2". You weigh 250 pounds. And you like to rumba. Hold on just a minute. She's 5'2", 250 pounds, and she likes to rumba. How'd you know that? That's your wife, and that's why you're on the leg. Hello?
Yeah.
Funny line.
You know, good stuff.
That's hilarious.
We've talked about the fact that all of you gentlemen, including our English friend Joe Baker, you're all eminently successful now and have been for a good many years. But again, to refer to an earlier point, it was not that easy when we all started out. And sometimes even in later years, there can be very, very rough nights upon rare occasion. And on the other shows, we've had fun talking to the various guys about terrible nights for them. When I say that to you, Bob, does anything come to mind? If not, don't worry about it.
Which one? It's funny, singers and dancers get together, and comedians, if you get enough comedians together, they'll eventually wind up talking about the time they died. Really just nothing works.
There's almost no way for a singer to die. I mean, he's doing something Irving Berlin wrote for him, and Billy May did a great arrangement, and Count Basie is playing it. How can you die with that, you know?
I was working at a club. I had just made the album, but it wasn't out. I was working at a club, which I'm sure Jan and Danny have played, called the Windsor Casino in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Right. And they didn't know who I was, and I stand by the reservation desk, and they call up, and they say, no, not Newkirk, Newhart. Newman, no, he's supposed to be a comedian. So I went out.
Supposed to be a comedian.
And I had 14 minutes. That's all I had, and died every night. No matter, I had the 14 minutes, and every night I died. And it was an old-time format. They had a guy came out, Columbo, his name was, and sang all the verses to Sorrento. About 18 minutes of Sorrento. Then the girls came out. They did a salute to Irving Berlin. They came out and they danced. And then an Italian juggling team, a dumbbell act, you know, the close of their act was they'd call a guy up out of the audience, and he'd sit in a chair and put a cigarette in his mouth, and they would knock between them, try to knock it out. Sometimes they would knock it out. Other times they would hit him in the side of the head. And the girls would come out again, and then I came out and I died every night, 14 minutes. And I knew it. And I asked the owner, I said, how many people do you have to have here before you do a second show? He said, 50. So I used to stand by the door for the second show, and as the 50th person would walk in, I'd go, damn! Every night. It was, you could almost depend on it.
That's great. Jan, you ever had that kind of suffering?
Well, last night I was doing I tell you, you know, as a rule, though, see, Bob, I tell you, Bob brought out an interesting point, though. You get into a situation like that, and you die the opening night, and you know pretty well that you're going to die for the engagement.
Especially in this case, they did not know who he was.
Right.
He had no reputation.
Right. Yeah, they didn't come to see him. So, but and the other thing is, the other way is true also, because if all conditions are good, the show in front of you is good, the atmosphere is good, the club is good. See, I find mostly it's atmosphere, mostly it's the place. It's never the people, you know. You put the same audience in a large room, you know, where the first row is 2 blocks away, and you're going to die. And you put them in an intimate place, you're hit. So you know pretty well by your opening, you know, how you're going to do. And I played the Latin Quarter in New York. Oh, they had big, spectacular reviews in those years, you know, and so forth. And like you say, all types of Risley acts, but they were all great, you know, because it was Broadway. And I used to close the show. I used to go on just before the finale. And every night, I opened, and I scored heavy. Boy, I'd make them scream every night. And it went on for about 2 weeks, and you just knew that, hey, this is a great room, great show. I'm in the right thing. I'm doing the right material, and I'm set. I walked out one night, jam-packed to the walls and all that, and I don't get a sound. And nice people, they were smiling. They were looking at me almost tenderly with tears in their eyes,
No laughs.
And I'm saying, what is this? Is the same guy, the same material, the same? And I'm just... And, as we were talking before, when a comic starts to die, the spittle starts to get...
Flop sweats.
The flop sweats fall. Then the lip gets on the teeth, and you can't get it off. You know what I mean?
Panic.
You cement up. You know what I mean? I can't believe that. I do the whole thing. So I used to do about 35, 40 minutes. I did it in about 8 minutes. I ran through it. I sounded like Henny Youngman, pow, 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 pow. Not a murmur, not a sound. I got off. And I just couldn't believe what happened. And the stagehand grabbed me and says, "No, Jan, I'm so sorry. We should have told you before. It was a whole room of people from Brazil. They bought the room out, And there wasn't a person there who spoke a word of English. So,
That's why. We have now to demonstrate another approach to comedy, and we can do that by bringing out any other comedian. As it happens, this young fellow is young, and he's funny in an original way. He has, I like his relaxation. He has a marvelous air of confidence, nothing of conceit. He just has a nice, likable quality, and there's a thoughtful, analytical element to his work, and he's doing very well for all those reasons. Very funny gentleman. Welcome, Franklyn Ajaye.
Thank you very much. I've been doing a lot of traveling lately. Just got in from Austin, Texas, which is a very slow town. I was out one Saturday, and I felt like walking around going, "Opie!" I know you're here somewhere. And I went to Hawaii recently, which is a very relaxing place. Tough place to do comedy, though, because the people are too happy. You know what I mean? I was doing a show in the club, and no one laughed. I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Hey, man, we don't need you. We have these shirts." We can laugh anytime we want to. If you had told me that there was a state where everybody wore those shirts, you could have had all my money, in that bed. The thing is, the first few days I was walking around, I was looking at these shirts. I was with my girlfriend. I said, "Baby, look at this shirt. This man looks like a valley." And they were looking terrible, but it's a weird thing. You see so many of these shirts that after a while, they actually start to look good to you. After about a week, I went out and bought me a couple of them. I said, "Got to have one of those, And I was walking around, I was kind of sharp. I was walking around, aloha, just like a native. Mahalo. I thought I was sharp, And those shirts do look good in Hawaii. They don't start to look silly to you again till you're on the plane coming back. I was sitting back. I just finished eating. All of a sudden, it's like a veil lifts from your eyes. I looked down. What the heck was I thinking about? Wait, no, you let me buy... My God, what do you have on? And yours goes to the floor. I'm telling you, I got up. There was pandemonium all over the plane. 400 people in these shirts, pushing and shoving, trying to get their coats. Guys were fighting. Hey, look at this shirt, man. Look what I got on. Cat said, "Yeah, I know your shirt looks bad, but look what I have on, man. I got 5 kids wearing this stuff." All of a sudden, the plane dipped, which really scared us. Went down about 500 feet, then it pulled up. I said, "Boy, what happened?" Stewardess came back, tried to calm us down. It's no problem. Pilots just looked at their shirts. Thank you. Very easygoing place. Everybody walks in Hawaii like they're playing golf. That's how I know I'm getting older, because I'm watching golf. I'm watching golf. It's kind of funny watching golf. I find it kind of fascinating. The golfers crack me up because they all have these plaid pants, all right? And then they got these big pot bellies, And they're just strolling, talking about, I'm an athlete. Hand me that club. Very slow-moving game. You know, you watch it, you know, and I'm amazed that they have the nerve to have instant replay, which is just a waste of tape. They'll show you a guy rolling the ball 3 feet into a hole, and they say, we're going to show you that again. I go, why? Some of you might have been asleep. I keep wondering how the game is going to change when a lot of black people start playing golf. You know it's going to change some. You know, we're going to add the element of speed to golf, first off. Right? You know, cat's going to be hitting the ball on the run. Waiting on the green for the ball to land. I think I should have hit that harder, man. But, you know, that's not going to be for a while. Because those plaid pants are going to keep black people out for a long time.
So thank you very much.
I mentioned in introducing Franklyn that one of the several reasons I like his work very much is he works with an ease, with a sense of confidence. I don't want to put you on the spot, but are you pretending to be comfortable and relaxed, or are you really that way?
Well, it depends, really. Sometimes I'm extremely comfortable. Mm-hmm. At other times, I consider it professional to project that comfortability to make the audience feel comfortable, because I have nerves. It's like Bjorn Borg. I always respected him because he was very calm on the outside, but even he would say that. He was very tense on the inside.
We mentioned on one of the other shows that Red Skelton, certainly one of the great comedians of the century, is so nervous, so terrified before every performance that he throws up. Yeah, so I've been told. Bob, how do you feel about that? Are you totally as relaxed as you appear?
No. I said...
You had to wake him up to ask him a question like that?
To this day, I get nervous, and I would feel funny if I didn't get nervous.
Really?
I'm convinced that the next time I go out on the stage, no one's going to laugh, and they're going to say, we're on to you. You had a nice run.
Funny, right?
Would you please leave us alone now?
Yeah.
And send back all the money.
Jack Benny was like that. Jack Benny was terribly nervous. Red, you did a scene with him one time where I was on the couch, and as the scene was over and they were going to black, and he was coming toward the couch, I jumped over the couch because I knew he was going to throw up on it.
Now, isn't that funny? You'd think that somebody was that good and that successful for that long, eventually you'd get over that, but...
Well, you have to have nerves before or after. I, fortunately, and my daughter Marla has it too. Thank God for that. It's also horrible after, but I suffer nervous reaction.
After?
Yes, sir. I come up to stage. I mean, many times I've been in the wings on a nightclub, and somebody's telling me a story, which I appreciate. Maybe it's something I haven't heard. I'll tell it the minute I get out there. And some of the people that work for me, they said, "Will you leave them alone? They're playing Danny Boy." So I let them finish his story. And I walk out very slowly, and the music is very grand. Phil Posh always says, you're not great. It's just that music and the way you walk." and they believe you. Yeah. All right, so, but after, I don't want to be reviewed by anybody afterward. Don't tell me how good or how bad. Nothing. Just leave me alone.
Yeah, it's over.
It's over. Now, I walk out, and I swear to you, forgive my immodesty, I've got a lot of nights where I flop, but this was one of those great nights where they stood in the middle of the act and stood at the end. I guess Wayne Newton fans were there. Everybody was standing. and nothing missed. And I felt really great, and I'm making a dash for my dressing room because I don't want to be told anything. And the guy comes up to me, and he says, he runs from the audience, gets on the stage, and says, "You were pretty good tonight."
Oh, yeah.
He didn't know what else to say. I grabbed him by his necktie, and I hung him up here. It was the shortest. And the guys that grabbed me, "What's the matter? You crazy?" And I said, "Please, I'm terribly sorry, sir, but..." And I ran in the dressing room.
Yeah, after a triumph, to be told you were pretty good.
But you're pretty good. You know, you want to say... He could say what it was real fast and get lost. And don't tell me, I know how bad I am out there. I know what fails. I know what's good, too. Yeah. Now I run into my dressing room, and I take my shorts and socks off, and I launder them. Takes me 10 minutes.
After every show?
performance, go right to the bathroom, close the door, and wash nice.
Just to relax?
Just to get come down. Then I'm ready for the world.
Yeah,
You can say to me, you stink, or you were sensational, and I'll thank you.
If he's hyper nervous, I send him my shorts.
Yeah, right.
Give him another 5 minutes.
You know the guy that did my hair, Mike French,
Yeah.
in Vegas? He used to say, I didn't know you could do that, boss. You realize how much money we could make Danny Thomas hand laundry by Danny Thomas?
You know, people don't realize when they speak to comics, but I guess nobody in the world uses language the way we do, so forcibly. And I wasn't cognizant of the fact the way I speak and have spoken all my life and at home, what an effect it might have on my children. But my oldest son is now a writer, and one day, he's a comedy writer, and one day he was being interviewed on television, and I was watching him, and he said to him, he says, Warren, the interviewer said, how did it feel to grow up in a household of in a comedian's household and all that? He said, well, he said, I'll tell you the truth, until I was 10 years old, I feared my father with my life. And I sat there watching this, and I suddenly, I just, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. I says, he feared me, my boy, And the guy was in shock that he would say this publicly. He said, what do you mean? He says, well, he used to come home, after a show every night, and he'd say to my mother, I killed him, I slaughtered him, I murdered him. I had him rolling in the aisle. He says, I fractured him. He says, Jesus, I thought I was married to a mafia guy, you know what I mean? Is that funny? And that's the way we talk. So for a guy to come over after you kill him, he says, hey, nice show. Nice show? You don't want to hear any mild language. Nice show.
We've all gotten... I remember how surprised, I can't say whether I was pleased or displeased because I still don't know about that, but when I first began doing on television what I had previously done on the radio and in clubs and stuff, it meant, because of the enormous audiences in television, even if you were lousy, it didn't matter, you still had 20, 30 million people watching your show, and if you were in 200 major cities, potentially 200 television critics. Now, on the nights I did, as you said, red hot, nothing went wrong, Louis Nye was funny, Don Knotts was funny, I was funny, the scenery was funny, the band was a triumph of comedy. Now, you figure you're going to get great reviews from this. And sure enough, you do from about 83% of the people. They say that was the funniest show of the year, they should win an Emmy and so forth. The other 17%, whatever it is, says, I don't think that show is as funny as it used to be, or I saw nothing funny on it. I used to think, how can this be? I mean, we do know it was a great show then. How come they're saying it's not funny?
There's a story they tell about, talking about critics, that Barrymore went back to England after not appearing there for 20 years, and John Barrymore had a drinking problem, and he did Hamlet. He hadn't done it for 20 years, and he was hungover and drunk, and every so often he would pause and wander off stage and throw up, and then he'd come back on and hold his head and miss his lines and bump into. And the critics said it was probably the most interesting interpretation of Hamlet that they had ever done. That's how much the critic knew about it.
If you pay attention, the critics should go crazy. Absolutely crazy. We did it. Go on, let me...
Just going to ask Franklyn, as one of the new school of comedians, do you guys pay that much attention to critics, or would you rather make each other laugh, the other comics?
Well, in 1974, I think I got a review. I've been doing this 12 years, and I got a review in Chicago. And I have this habit of sometimes laughing at my own stuff on stage. And it is something that's always ingratiated me to audiences. And I got a review that said he would be good if he wouldn't laugh at his own jokes, okay? Now, I had always gotten great responses from the audience. Well, I like the way you laugh, because I have kind of a crazy laugh. Sometimes and I looked at that review, and up until that time, I had feared being reviewed or getting something that was halfway negative, because I had a lot of fear when I first started out. And I sat there, and I just said, the audiences like it, I'm going to go with that. And I'm going to be able to be I'm going to not take him as serious. And that was the last time I really let something really affect me.
The audience is the real jury. I understand you once got some advice from Bob Newhart, is that right?
Yes, and I told him this today, he didn't remember it. I worked in Century City in a clothing store. His wife had come in and bought a suit for him. You don't shop for yourself? For his birthday, okay.
I do very little.
This is before you were...
Before I was a comedian. I had just come out, I quit law school and come back out here.
I was going to ask, where were you when this thing was...
And he came in the next day, and everybody
I flunked out of law school. He quit law school. I take my...
Well, I flunked out, too, you know. I think maybe that's what all comedians do, but...
Flunked out of something.
And he came in, and I was really thinking about being a comedian. So when he came in, I was really excited. I told everybody, I got to wait on him. And I was fitting his suit for him, and I asked him, how did he start writing his routines? What procedure? And he gave me something that was very valuable. He said, you list the topic, and then you just write an outline, A, B, C, D, of what you want to cover. And then you write it and see if you can cover those points. And that was the way I started writing my first routines.
Interesting.
When I started, I just listened to what he said.
There's one other piece of advice, because I always give it to any young comedian who asks me, especially a new piece of material. You write, I call them exit doors. You know,
exit doors?
Exit doors.
Yeah.
You write to a certain spot where you can get out in case it isn't working.
Yeah, right.
Then you write to another exit door, and you get out there if it isn't working. And you just keep going from one exit door.
Yeah.
Before you know it, you got 6 minutes. But always leave yourself, if it isn't going, get out. Get out and go somewhere else, but don't.
You're right. You're not the most confident performer. But one of the funniest.
Now, you call them exit doors. I call them audibles.
Audible?
Yeah, like
How do you mean?
at the quarterback.
Oh, I see.
You walk out, and of course, my funny line, my opening line is hysterical. Good evening. And then I look around, and if it's a sea of teeth, everybody's there to have a good time. You know you're home years ago, but if it's not, then you say, I'm not going to open with that other thing. You do an audible. You just change your mind right then and there. And start.
You've raised...
Yeah, I just wrote a routine with 7 exit doors. No laughs. I say a line, I go to the next exit, and then I say another one, and then I go through the door.
Turn left, turn right.
Danny, you've just raised what is, to me, one of the other most fascinating questions about the world of performing generally, and it most specifically applies to comedy. I first noticed this phenomenon, for which I have as yet no full explanation, back in 1949. I was in 48, 49, and 50 doing a late-night radio comedy show here in town. And it was a one-man show. I would have had 9 people, but there was only money for me, so that was it. And so every night the audience would come in as this, and I would peek out to see if it was time for me to go out and do the warm-up. The show was on the air live. So I began to notice, night by night, one night I'd look out, and I knew right then it was going to be a big show. People were walking around and talking, hey, Charlie, sit over here. And it was like a crowd at a basketball game where the team has been winning for a week. You know, very great excitement. Other nights I'd peek out, and there was lovely people sitting in a Methodist church, you know, just sitting like this. It was much tougher for me to get laughs that night. Now, the warm-up is what you do before the show starts. For all of us, it's always basically the same. It's like a little 6 minutes of your act. Jokes are the same every night. You're the same. Your hair is the same. Everything's the same. When the audience was hot, every line would get a scream like Bob Hope overseas, you know. And other nights, the same great lines would get a 12 or a 14. And I noted that, but had no explanation whatever. I just couldn't make any sense of it. I thought maybe it was air conditioning or God knows what. First thing I went to is maybe it's nights of the week. I realized I was wrong, because sometimes I would die on a Saturday night and be a big success on Monday night. I finally got a clue in the early 1950s when I came across a newspaper item. Tom Ewell, fine comedy actor, and, oh, Lord.
David Wayne.
David Wayne, thank you.
I've told you that story.
Yeah, I think I told you years ago. Anyway, those were the guys. Each was in a hit Broadway comedy at the same time. Big smash, they'd all been running for 6 months. Comedies. And as actors often do in New York in the theater, they get together at Sardi's or some other nearby place for a drink.
What's important is that they were diverse comedies, completely. Tom Ewell was doing 7-Year Itch, and David Wayne was doing Tea House of the August Moon.
Yes.
So you couldn't find 2 comedies that were more diverse, right?
Okay. Yeah, totally relevant point. Anyway, one night, Tom happened to say, how'd it go tonight? And David said, oh, powerhouse, every line. And the guy said, isn't that funny? It was that way for us, too. They forgot about this. A week later, again, well, to get to the point, every night it was great for one comedy, it was just that great for the other.
Right.
And, here's the weird part, every night it was terrible for one comedy, it was the same for both of them. Now, the theaters are 4 blocks apart, as Jan says, totally different plays. As soon as I read that, I thought, well, now I know where to focus in to look for the solution in a scientific sense. It has to be something that has nothing to do with the performance, nothing to do with the play, nothing to do with the script or the theater. It's outside.
Atmospheric.
Atmospheric could be seasons of the moon, could be sunspots, could be barometric pressure. You know, maybe the barometric pressure is falling or rising. So isn't this weird that this can determine how many laughs Bob Hope gets on Tuesday night or how many he doesn't get on Thursday night? Weird.
That's right.
I'll be running along now.
Good job. Very good.
Well, you can ask a bartender or any nightclub performer, and he'll tell you whether there's a full moon or not out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the word lunatic comes from.
Yeah.
Luna.
Lunatic.
Well, I must say, after all these years in this business, comedy to me is still mysterious. It cannot be defined. Everybody tries to define it. And you wrote, I think, the best book on the subject. You broke down all the comedians and discussed how, where, and still, the mystery still remains. You know,
why do they laugh? What makes people laugh?
Well, you know, excuse me, I didn't mean
No, go ahead.
jump in.
No.
I try to draw a lot of correlations between sports and comedy. I feel that comedians are like singles tennis players. As we're out there and we have no one to, if the audience is with us, great, but we have to really lift them. And when we fail, we have to look inwards a lot of times. But what keeps me sane is that you go, no matter how good a baseball team is, they're going to lose sometimes inexplicably, or the greatest hitter is going to go 0 for 4 that day. And that helps me keep it in perspective on the night that I have an off night. I say, I just went 0 for 4. Nolan Ryan was pitching today. They were sitting out there, you know. And tomorrow I may go 5 for 6. And I try not to analyze it that much. Whereas before I used to really get very depressed if I have a bad night.
You have that ability to analyze, which stands you in very good stead, not only as a performer, but obviously as a human being, too.
You know, the time of tragedy is when a comedian really scores.
Oh, sure. That's true. Yeah. That's true. Bob Hope is never so funny as when there's a war going on.
The worst feeling in the world when you're a comedian is when you're 10 minutes into your act and you've done your strongest joke and nothing has happened and you have nothing stronger coming for the next 40 minutes. And you just got to stand there and you know you just did your best joke.
You know, that's especially in monology. I think that's where storytellers are blessed.
Yeah.
Because you really can use your exit, any exit you want.
Yeah. Also, the story, if it's a 4-minute story, it carries you through 4 minutes.
So, yes.
Without bombing.
Without, you know, they're not bombing. They're listening to the build-up.
Right.
And you know that the punchline is going to be there. But in the build-up, and if they're not like at least chuckling or smiling, getting the picture that you're trying to draw, you say, I hate to digress, but, you know, I got it. This reminds me so much of this lady. And you do Mrs. Lefkowitz, or you do eat the black man on a streetcar, or take the Italian, whatever. I mean, you get escape.
Or you get that Jolson impression ready.
Yeah. Oh, shut up.
Joe, you were saying something before when we...
Never picks on me in real life. In real life, never. This is not real.
You find these same points relate to comedy as performed in England?
Yes, very much. Because we all use your material anyway. I used to, when I was single, I knew a girl who was an air hostess. And she used to fly from London to New York. And on Broadway, there was this shop, Pop Somebody's store. And to me, I thought all American comedians were idiots. Because they would, no, really, they'd do their whole act. And this girl would go and say, hello. Do you have a thing called Bob Newhart on? Thank you, $3 for.
Oh, the record albums.
Yeah.
I see.
Bring them back, and I wasn't the only one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Really? I mean, a couple can be nameless. And I'd say, get me this album, that album, and they used to get. And I used to take hunks, but I feel good because when I came over, a lot of the big stars, like we've had on the show tonight and everything. Would say, I've never heard of him. And I thought, oh, good, I'm not such a thief. And then I'd walk on that night and say, you know, my wife, you know, I came home, knocked to the door, I do the wife routine, and Americans had never heard it. And I told them, you know. But one thing we had on the show the other week, and I'll do it very quickly, was when people were saying how they come up to brilliance like this and say, listen, I've got to tell you a joke. You can clean it up or whatever. Or they would tell you a joke which you knew, but they took 1 hour to do the punchline. And I'm sitting there one day, and a guy came into a cafe in South Africa. He said, I saw you last night. I said, did you? He said, yeah. He said, I'll got a joke for you. It's the story of 2 Scottish commandos captured by the Germans, taken to a chateau, and the German officer said to one soldier, you stay here, and you come with me. And they took him in this big thing, gates, chains, bolts, and the other little guy's the kilt on is listening, and he heard the German officer say, what is your name? Ooh. And what is your regiment? Ooh. Were you dropped by a parachute? Ooh. or a little dinghy off the coast of France. Oh! And will you please stop hitting me when I'm interrogating you? Yeah. And I'm looking at the guy going, yeah, hurry up.
Well, you know, you never should put down people who are going to tell you, stories, because that's how you get them.
Sure.
It's true. He says, but I brought back a story from, of all places, Israel, about 8, 9 years ago. I'm still doing my act, and 90% of the comedians do
We
it.
just have a minute left. Can you tell it in a minute?
I'll be back on another night with you. There's a minute left on the show?
Just about, yeah, but can you squeeze it in?
Well, here's the joke. Cab driver told it. The build-up is funnier than the joke, but I'll tell you the joke. Everyone swiped it anyway. You probably heard it. But an Israeli... You're going to go up on the punchline, Bob? I only got a minute.
You got 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Huh? Man comes home from work, lives in the 5th floor, walks in, he smells cigar smoke. He says to his wife, "Who was here?" She says, "Nobody." He says, "Don't lie to me. You don't smoke cigars. I don't smoke cigars. I smell cigar smoke. You had a man here." He says, "You don't smell anything with that ugly nose of yours, you jealous animal. Nobody was here." He was so angry, he walked out the window, and there, 5 stories below, he sees this guy coming out of the building, smoking his big cigars, singing and dancing, happy as a lark. He got so angry, he ripped the refrigerator out of the wall, threw it out of the window, hit him on the head, and killed him. When he realized what he did, he said, "My heavens, what did I do? I killed this poor man. Why? He spent a few minutes with my wife. Too much fun he couldn't have had." So he was so contrite, he committed suicide, jumped out of the window and killed himself. So far, it's a funny joke, isn't it? Now, about an hour later, 3 men are up in heaven trying to get through the pearly gates. St. Peter says, "Before we allow you through the pearly gates, you must tell us how you died." Said, "First man, how did you die?" I said, "I don't know, smoking this big cigar, singing and dancing, happy as a lark. All of a sudden, this refrigerator gave me a shot in the head and killed me." I said to Sarah, "How did you die?" "I threw the refrigerator on his head. I came home from work, smelled cigar smoke. My wife denied anybody'd been in the apartment. When I saw this clown coming out of the building, smoking that big cigar, singing and dancing, I got so angry, ripped the refrigerator, threw it out the window, hit him on the head, and killed him. And when I realized what I did, I committed suicide. Jumped out the window, killed myself. That's how I died." I say, "Third man, how did you die?" He said, "I don't know. I was sitting in a refrigerator."
Thank you, John Murray, and thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all. Franklyn, great to have you. Franklyn Ajaye, Danny Thomas. Thank you, Bob. Joe Baker, Dan. Thanks for joining us here at the Comedy Room.